Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dynamis pod. Today, I am joined by Mr. Bill Buppert of Chasing Ghosts podcast and Irregular Warfare podcast. Bill, if you would, introduce yourself to the people.
So, hi, it's an honor to be here, Robert. Thank you. I've got the podcast called Chasing Ghosts and Irregular Warfare podcast. I also have one called War Notes, which is a conflict podcast. And the reason why I created that was to broaden my portfolio so I wouldn't only discuss irregular warfare, and I could also discuss larger conflict in 20th century, 21st century. I'm a military historian, not by trade, but by avocation. I'm an engineer by trade, and I'm retired from the U.S. Army, and I have been to various neo-imperialist shit pits planet-wide in colonial service to the king, as it were, in the U.S. I've spent almost 2 years in Afghanistan. I was fortunate enough to be there, and that was 2015, and it was there where I found my day job, where I've never had to step in another conflict zone since that time. But I'm also getting long in the tooth. I'm in the winter of my years, and here I am.
That's a wonderful introduction, and I really like the fact that you mentioned about what type of governance that we seem to be under. So that's kind of where I would like to start the conversation. Where do you see America at this time with her governance? What are we? Are we an empire at this point?
So we've been an empire essentially since, as you know, I'm a historian, so you're tempting me here, and I'm going to go into it. We've been an empire, I would say, since 1892, officially 1892, 93, as far as taking over the Hawaiian government and claiming the Hawaiian Islands for ourselves. 1898, we have the Spanish-American War, and from that point, we get the Philippines as a territory with some suzerainty, but over time, we give them a little bit of independence. We get Cuba and all of the Spanish colonial assets. Then, of course, there's World War I, where America finds the biggest excuse to expand its own brand of empire. I blame it all.
Mhm.
I blame everything that's happened in the 20th century as far as institutional violence of war and terrorism on Woodrow Wilson,
Mhm.
one of the worst presidents we've ever had, who was followed 2 presidents after by my favorite president, who was Calvin Coolidge.
Yes.
So fast forwarding to today, we are an empire, but an empire that refuses to acknowledge that we're an empire. Everything an empire does, it brings home. Great
Mhm.
Britain, by the end of World War II, one could call it the war to save Joseph Stalin. Great Britain by 1947-48 had lost all of their colonies, to include India in 47 and 48, after standing astride the globe. You know, the sun never sets. Well, they ended up with rocks. They ended up with rocks at Pitcairn, at the Falkland Islands, and a number of others. And since that time, that empire has sort of shriveled to within. And the United Kingdom, as we speak, is going to have a civil war far sooner than we do. I think, Robert, we're going to be all over the map during this talk, so I may skip over certain places. So if I can
Certainly.
remember your first question, it was, what is the state of our governance? The state of our governance is that federal overreach continues and hasn't stopped since the deep state assumed singularity in March 1933 under FDR.
So, me personally, I go back a little further than that because I think any entity that wants to take over a people, they really have to wrap up the economy first, I feel. I think it goes back to the economic side. Maybe you could speak a little bit to our trappings of what happened in 1913 with the Fed and the creation of fiat currency.
Sure, all fiat currency. I'm an economist by formal training from university, and I'm an Austrian economist because I was so fortunate that I went to a university in Northern California called Humboldt State, which is now Humboldt Polytechnic. I had just gotten out of the Navy. I was still in the reserves, And if you find Berkeley to be too right wing and oppressive, you go to my school at Humboldt. But I arrived there. I am not of a socialist or communist mindset or a government. I like to use the word government supremacism. I don't have that. Two Austrian economists are hiding in a basement at the economics department. And for 3 glorious years, I was able to learn their craft, not as well as they can, and certainly not by any stretch, like von Mises, Baron Barach, and Rothbard and Hayek and all the rest of the greats. I can read them, but and I have that
Sure.
understanding. They provided me the framework of understanding, but it isn't a place where I've done any academic digging or original work. I simply am at the knee of the masters. So when it
Sure.
comes to that. So
Understood.
economics, when it comes to economics, what we have to recognize is, in my opinion, capitalism isn't an economic framework imposed from within or without. It is a natural course of human events. I'm stealing that line from Robert E. Lee. It is the natural course of human events in which, through persuasion, cooperation, and handshakes, with a gun in our holster on our side, we
Hmm.
can trade goods and services for things that we don't have a talent for things that we do have a talent for, whether it's a good or service. So every war against capitalism is a war against human nature. But that war exists because government supremacism, in all of its instantiations and permutations, whether they call it National Socialism, fascism, anything like that, it's all about the government taking control of your individual and moral agency. And it always inevitably fails because government central planning is it's a cacocracy. It's ruled by the shit people. It's ruled by the worst people. It's ruled by the most psychotic and sociopathic people because that's who rises in politics. Politician is a cute little word for violence broker because all of everything that a government does is based on the gun. It's based on compulsion. So back to what you were saying about 1913 when the income tax came around. All of a sudden, for all that time, since 1791, America had existed without an income tax, even though Lincoln tried to do that in the Second American Civil War.
Yes.
He only did it for, I think, a year or two, and then it either dissolved or just went by the wayside. 1913, all of a sudden, we have this income tax. An income tax which was claimed at the time, and people can check on this to make sure I have the numbers right. I may not. So I'm making a swag here. I think they said on the top 1 to 3% of earners that they would be paying in the single digits in a percentage. So, Robert, I have a quiz for you as far as the income tax. 30 years later, in 1943, what is the top marginal income tax rate on Americans under Red DR's administration?
I'd go 32%.
94.
Now, I was way off.
Now that's 94% in a progressive taxation because if you fast forward to today, when Reagan came into office, we had a tax rate at 70% because when Ike came in office, he said, this is outrageous to have 94% and reduced it to 88. But what they found over time is that there's a certain entropic effect about high taxes where you pretend to work, I'll pretend to pay you, or vice versa. So I think they discovered briefly that when you reduce the taxes, you get more revenue. But one thing that galls me about present spending talk and all the fraud that you and I are witnessing that's been there for so long is don't
Yes.
talk to me about tax rates until you justify every dime that you spend. I
Yes.
I don't know why we would entertain this note. Well, we need to raise the taxes here or adjust them. No, justify all your spending first. And I would posit again a swag that 25% of the present federal budget is fraud,
Easily.
simply fraud. So,
I would agree with that.
did that answer the question? I know I went
And
around the
it
corner
did.
and okay.
No, that's perfectly fine. It did. The Fed, so the Fed itself, people may or may not know, it's a corporation. So a lot of your left wing people always say, down with corporations. We don't like corporations. But we're trapped in this system where we work all day for money that's honestly not real. When you break it down to brass tacks, the money that we have in and out of our hands is almost like company till at this point. So
Well, all people have to remember is that all fiat currencies have a floor value of 0, and
Yes.
all real metal, platinum, palladium, rhodium, silver, gold, has a floor above 0. That's what we know.
Yes.
Or those weapons that you see behind me will always have a value above 0.
Exactly.
So
Like hard assets,
hard
one
assets.
could call. Yeah.
Yep. And
So,
of course, who was it who took us off that hard asset? It was Red DR. But who made it illegal to even use it as a currency of value? That was Nixon.
yeah.
So
Yeah, it's exactly it. To that point, because we are definitely going to cover all types of things, but one of the things that I've noticed about that is Nixon's in, Nixon takes us off the silver standard, and then all of a sudden now, really all of money is on a promise because it said, states it on the actual certificate that you get, that dollar bill. Um, we move to this place where we start cozying up to a communist China. Maybe you can speak a little bit economically how that has seemed like it's come back to actually bite us in lost industry and IP theft through colleges and college systems, with them coming in on visa, sometimes overstaying visa. And then also, maybe you could speak a little bit to the third point, the fact that what they do now possibly will take out our economy because it is growing at such a fast rate. Maybe those three things we can juggle with a little bit.
so I don't think that acceleration in an economy, if it's real productivity, is a bad thing, but the boom and bust cycle is something that the Austrians always insist, those pesky Austrian economists always insist is it's a mythos created by fiat currencies. And if you look at the depression in 1919 and 1920, shortly after our exit from World War One, you discover that the government said, hands off. We're gonna bad business should fail. And that's
Yes.
exactly what happened. So that depression lasted, I think, 12 to 14 months. Fast forward
Hmm.
to 1930, 1931. Then you have the depression as a result of the crash at the end of the 20s. A lot of that had to do with fiat currency. A lot of that had to do with the bubbles that were created at the time with a lot of speculation. And then you have Red DR come in, FDR, and he does awful things to the economy. He very much, I guess you could characterize it as almost an emulation of
Hmm.
Stalinist, Mussolini, and Hitlerite things. He seemed to have gone to a government supremacist buffet, and you see the Time magazine covers in the 1930s, where all
Yes.
of a sudden you have Hitler being seen in a good light in the 1930s. Same with Mussolini, same with Stalin, who I think happened to make Time magazine cover 3 or 4 times. But what you also discover is that unemployment isn't going down. Government debt is skyrocketing. If it weren't for the entry into World War II, I I don't think a recovery would have happened at all. And World War II was a fantasist dream for government supremacists because all of a
Certainly.
sudden control of the economy is taken over by the United States. I would say in the entirety of the Western world, if not the entire planet at the time, government supremacism just rocked the world. Unfortunately, in the end, with World War II, what
Yes.
it did is it made the world safe for communist expansion. And that's what happened after that. Red DR had 2 fellows in his administration, and your listeners can look this up in the Venona transcripts. You will find that Harry Hopkins, who I think was the senior advisor to the president, and then Harry Dexter White at the Treasury, both had Soviet code names and worked for the
Yep.
KGB. You have
Yes.
Hopkins going over before World War II because there were some very lucrative Lend-Lease deals going on with the Russians, and he's going
Hmm.
over there to take orders from his handlers. Did Red DR know that? Did he not know that? I don't know if he did or not, but it, the awful office was polluted with communist influence. And mind you, too, I don't want to skip this. In the 1930s, the Communist Party USA reached its zenith in
Hmm.
membership. There was a national convention in Chicago, and you'll love this because you just mentioned them, Robert. In Chicago, there was a 5-story representation of Lincoln at the Communist Party USA annual convention because it just so happens that Marx and Lincoln corresponded and Marx approved of Lincoln's behavior
Hmm.
in America's second revolution. So I refer to, by the way, I refer to the Civil War then, and I'm entitled to do this as an eccentric historian because from 1775 until 1783, that was the first American Civil War because everybody was an Englishman. Paul Revere, I used to teach at Appleseed and really enjoyed that. And we tell
Hmm.
the story of the three strikes of the match when it came to what lit off our Civil War in America and our divorce from London. When Paul Revere rode, he didn't say the British are coming because he was British in the saddle. He said the redcoats are out.
Yes.
So I really enjoy specificity when it comes to this and shattering some myths that people get in the awful Marxist madrasas, posing as schools K through PhD.
Speaking of the country's founding, going back to that, just shortly after our 250th anniversary as being a country, Paul Revere being, screaming about redcoats. Um, if you go back to that time, a lot of people think that it was a 3 pence tax on tea that was like the last straw, but they forget about the intolerable acts that had been happening up to and leading up to, the Boston Tea Party. A lot of people forget about that this was a escalation up through time as the country's growing and getting larger and becoming more of an economic power in the world. Um, people don't know these things because in order to find that information now, you almost have to go out and be completely autodidactic and find it yourself. You're not going to find that at any place that's teaching on the corner, like you
Yeah,
were mentioning before. Like you
yeah.
have to go really dig for this information. You can't find it. Um, so to that, going to the education side, I try to make sure that when I'm conveying information, I try to do it in a very methodical way so that people can pick it back up and take it and run with it. Um, what do you think has happened to the university system in our country that at one point was the peak of education in an entire nation? I feel like, and especially the college system. A lot of folks don't realize that most of the colleges, there's some government labs that are all over the nation that are planted for that reason. It's strategic. But maybe to the education side, what's actually happened? Have they really dumbed down education so badly that people really don't know their own history?
So I think they have, but I want to address another point very quickly that you brought up about the American founding. If it hadn't been for the Cousins War from 1756 to 65, where the Spanish and the French and the British fought for supremacy over the Atlantic seaboard, we would not have won the first American Civil War with Washington and that whole cast of characters because it was the French and Spanish who swore revenge because a world war had been going on. One can argue that the First World War occurred during the French and Indian War, that Cousins War, but the Spanish and the French provided so much in materiel and financial assistance and training and stuff like that. If it hadn't been for them, our divorce from London would have failed. So let's fast forward to today with education. We home educated all of our children because I don't want the government instructing my children. I'm blessed. I have 5 children, 3 sons, 2 daughters, and now my eighth and ninth grandchildren will be arriving
Wow.
this year. As a matter of fact, my eighth arrived 2 days ago, and in October, my
Congratulations.
my thank you, my ninth arrives, and they're all home educated, and they have stay-at-home moms, and that is blessings beyond repair because it makes me immortal because they're not going to be trained to be Marxist dullards or, attend the madrasas and be turned into these non-reading automatons. I think the collision of social media, the ubiquitous use of cell phones with the youth and computers,
Hmm.
and the really slovenly and stupid people that teach K through 12. When I went to university, among the most idiotic people I met were either journalists or educators or education aspirants because they were just stupid as a box of rocks. And I guess that's why they gravitated to these kind of, I would refer to them as lazy and shiftless professions. I was programmed from an early age where, oh, you're supposed to think highly of teachers as heroes and stuff like that. I think none of the kind, and I absolutely loathe the fact that the government subsidizes education. As a matter of fact, I would suggest this to you: if we zeroed out all government funding to education in a generation, communism as an idea would disappear. So now let's go into the university and collegiate system. And why is it that among the non STEM students, so many of them veer left and government supremacist, and even now socialist and communist? It's because they're living in this massive fart bubble that you and I pay for, and my children and grandchildren, who aren't even paying taxes yet, debt is imposed upon all of us for them so that we can have these people go to universities as a finishing school for communist thought and shiftlessness and government supremacist cheerleading and dumb as a box of rocks. So I know that's going to
Certainly.
offend, that's probably going to offend some people in your audience, but there it is, because your right to be offended ends where my right to speak begins.
Exactly true. So like the Hegel, the Marcuses, all of these things that are being taught in,
Bernays.
yeah, and Bernays that are being taught, and really, this is tough to get back to, but brown shirts, all these different things that we see across Europe, fascist black shirts, um, really, if you ask me, it goes back to our own government. Nazis actually seen what our government was doing in the 20s and 30s as they were gaining power in Europe. They seen what we were doing, and they were like, that actually seems to work. Like, that's kind of crazy and it's like a weird mix and mash of things that we were doing where we didn't really go off the rails too far that direction that they kind of gravitated towards, and they really grabbed, like Goebbels with Bernays. And then also after the absolute bleeding of young men in World War One, we have to have the Boy Scouts. Now we have to train our sons and daughters in the Girl Scouts later that, hey, we're going to have a new generation to come and fight these wars. So it kind of starts there, and people really, really are being taken down this path where they do not know their own history. They don't
The
know their
world
own
was a
history in our
grand place
country.
before 1914.
Yes,
It was a
yes,
grand place. And then all of a sudden, in that 4 years, and you're referring to German youth, 8 million German youth died in both World War I and World War II. And they have a peculiar penchant for engineering and scientific acumen. And I think
yes,
that if we had those 8 million young men here instead of those wars, that we would probably be in near space by now, possibly. As far as Hitler and the brown shirts and the black shirts and Italy and such, it's all government supremacism. As a matter of fact,
yes.
I this is going to shock some members of your audience, but I think there's a direct connection between today's woke tards
Hmm.
and the identitarian totalitarians who referred to themselves as National Socialist. Because what the National Socialists did, apart from the fascists in Italy, but they were closer, and the communists in the Soviet Union, was they suggested that it was bloodlines and racial purity that
Yes,
would be the marker of who you were as a human being. In other words, nothing about this interior space, nothing about your
yeah,
heart, simply about your melanin content, your groin tackle, whatever the case may be.
yeah,
And it drives the woke tards nuts, but I always tell them that they are the faithful heirs to Hitlerite fever dreams.
yeah. No, it's. I think you're 100% accurate with every statement that you just made. Um, so to war, because you're a war historian.
I'm a
One
war
of the
nerd. That's what
things,
my wife calls me,
yeah,
a war nerd.
sure. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we're all nerded out. We nerd out quite a bit here, usually just with automotive stuff. But I am very happy that you came on because this is kind of what when I talked about Dynamis Pod in the beginning, this is what I really wanted it to do is kind of reach out and branch across all different types of
Good,
acumen and
good.
different types of
Yeah,
disciplines.
yeah.
But coming back to war itself, I had heard one of your podcasts, and this was new to me. I had not heard this, and it really does make a lot of sense when you sit down to think about it in real dollars and cents of what's spent. Um, Carrier fleets, so aircraft carrier fleets made into fish apartments.
Future
Maybe
fish
you can,
apartments.
yeah, future fish apartments. Maybe you can touch a little bit on that because that was very eye opening to me. And I think what's the gentleman's name? Vandergrail. You'll get this better than I will. I'm just like I literally learned
Vandernagle.
about him yesterday.
Vandernagle.
That's it.
Did you get his book?
Vandernagle. I did not get his book yet, but
Yeah.
that's definitely on my list
Highly
to pick
recommend it.
up
A
because
serving officer doing that. I'm surprised
yes,
he hasn't been lynched.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. And I've
I
seen
want
some of the
to go
things
ahead.
that he put out, like steps of what should be done in the Navy. And I was like, wow, that's amazing that
Well, that
someone
was
went to
my,
that level.
yeah, when I did war notes, with the new administration coming in, I said, here's a
Yeah.
plan to fix the DOD. And, we have the finest 20th century fleet in purpose and
Hmm.
fleet in being and land forces that are unfit for purpose in the 21st century across
Sure.
the board, whether it's land forces, air forces, or whatever the case may be. My point with the carrier is
Hmm.
that as brilliant a modality as that was for war, because it won the Pacific War, there's no doubt in my mind, and that our acumen, education, industrial might, innovation, and everything between the carriers, the aircraft that we created for the carriers, those brilliant and beautiful young men who were the pilots and the Marines and everything in the Pacific theater, none of that would have happened without the carrier. Now, in the first 3 years of the war, from 1939 to 1941, even though I always put the beginning of World War II in the summer of 1932 with the Japanese invasion of Mukden in China.
Okay.
That's where the kinetic war really started, because from there, all of a sudden, the Japanese are really putting their academic and martial hats on for the 20th century to
Hmm.
learn how to do what they do. And from 1939 to 1941, I would suggest maybe into the first 6 months of 1942, there's no finer naval aviators on planet Earth than the Japanese pilots. But unlike the America and the West, their pilots fly until they die. What we did is that our extraordinary pilots, they'd be out there for 6 months, 12 months, then we bring them back to the schoolhouse to
Hmm.
teach. So I'm providing this proviso because I don't want people to think that I have this animus against carriers because they're not effective. They were effective until 1945, then they stopped being effective, and they've
Hmm.
never been effective since then. And now in this 21st century, there's a notion called salvo competition. And what salvo competition means is that if I'm engaged in missile warfare and
Hmm.
aviation warfare, but let's call it missile warfare for this thought experiment. In order for me to take down incoming missiles and achieve a probability of kill above 91%, I must send up a salvo of 2 to 4 interceptors to take that missile down that is on a parabola to land in my lap. So the point that I'm making is that pretty soon, with the DFXX series of anti-ship missiles that the Chinese employed, as an example of the inefficacy of the carrier, they won't be able to leave the ports in San Diego or Seattle, and it'd be better to keep them there because then when they're sunk, it'd be easier to salvage them and bring them to a better fish apartment location. But
Yeah.
I just a little. I'm not on the Christmas card list for the Aircraft Carrier Industrial Base Coalition. They've taken me off. They don't invite me to parties anymore. But when I look at it across the board,
Sona
from
non
soup
grata.
to nuts, yes, I am. I just think it's foolish when you. I'm I'm an operations research guy by
Hmm.
trade, also. And what operations research people do is we study how to do things better, how to make them better, how to examine them in total, and if failures occur, to identify what the probable cause is, what the proximate cause is, and what the root cause is, and then build trees from there so that we don't replicate what's done. But and I'll bore you with this very quickly about what's a carrier for. A
Not boring at all.
carrier
Keep going.
Well, okay. A carrier is an aviation projection platform, not guns, not missiles, nothing. Aviation. So we have debited our present squadrons on aircraft carriers by approximately 25%, bringing them from roughly 80 birds. And I think that the Essex class fleet carriers, World War II, could have a maximum above 100 plus for the birds. But we're down to about 60 now. That's not 60 fighters. And there's a one third, one third, one third rule in the military, which is that one third of things are ready. And this should resonate with you because you're a
Hmm.
mechanic. One third are
Yeah.
ready, one third are being reconstituted, repaired, and then one third are in another state where the pilots are in training and they're not certified. They're seeking certifications. So what that means, I get 60 birds on there. Well, let's suppose that my sortie generation, which is sending birds aloft on a mission set, I'll
Hmm.
probably be able to send 8 to 10 aloft. When I send them through, if they have to fire through missile corridors to blast their way in order to deliver their munitions, that's 8 to 10 aircraft. Now, why would it be 8 to 10 aircraft of 60 aircraft? I remember that rule of threes. And remember this,
Yeah.
in order for that naval flotilla to be protected, they do use combat air patrols and barrier combat air patrols. So 10 to 15 birds are going to be assigned to doing that orbiting around the carrier and the entire flotilla. So essentially, what you've done is you've taken 5,000 people, put them on this flat top ship. They're surrounded by other ships, to include one or two submarines. One could say there's probably 12,000 people there. They've launched 10 aircraft. Let's call it two people per bird. So
Hmm.
20 folks are leaving this flotilla to go on a combat radius that puts them well within that DFX missile fire range. And
Sure.
in the end, to do what? Why would you send manned aircraft to do this very thing? But it's the F 35, which is probably one of the most expensive $2 trillion defense mistakes that America has ever made. They tried to do too much with too much to make it do a lot of things that it really
Everything.
didn't do well. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's where I was going. Like you're saying, like they did all of these things to try to make it all things to all people, and that
All
really
things, all
doesn't
people.
work.
And
That
the
doesn't
stealth
work.
nonsense.
Yeah, yeah.
The stuff.
So
What's
to
Yeah,
the
go
money
ahead.
part of it, like how much money does it cost to run these gigantic flotillas that are out there? And then if you would kind of what you were getting ready to say, but then also bring up the Aegis, um, this other system that we have
With
that
the
we
with the
could be
Spy
using.
7 system.
Yeah.
Now the Aegis, I don't have too much beef with the Aegis on surface naval platforms, but
Hmm.
I happen to think, and I'm in the minority, of course, in this in defense circles, that the age of manned aircraft, manned tanks, manned IFVs
Hmm.
is in the hazard, and we may be closing that door. In 2020, even with Nagorno-Karabakh, where you had what I would characterize as between Armenia and Azerbaijan, the first war in which UASs and FPVs had a big part to play for both ISR persistent surveillance and for munitions delivery, those kind of things. You couldn't have convinced me, and I think I'm a pretty savvy conflict observer since I've been doing it all of my adult life, that in 2025, Robert, 80% of all casualties in the Ukraine are FPVs and UASs. What it's done as a revolution in military affairs is it has taken millennia of infantry combat and almost rendered them moot. Because right here, right now, for less than $1,000, and this is going to be several cheap UASs, I can take out a soldier. And if I take out an American soldier, I'm taking out a soldier who we've probably spent $500,000 on training.
Yeah.
He's wearing a significant amount of kit to include $5,000 nods, very expensive riflery and
Yeah.
scopes and all of those
Chest
things.
rigs. Yeah.
And they're going to get taken out by these individuated fighting modalities that we don't have a clue about. And I also want to say, you're a science fiction nerd to a certain extent, like me, right? Big time, especially. in my youth. And I read Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein. And I thought to myself, man, won't that be great where Robert and I can step into our exoskeletons and go cleave men from nape to chaps? Well, guess what? It doesn't make sense, does it?
No,
Let
not
robots.
anymore, it doesn't.
Why would you put a meat sack in a mechanical device when you can simply send out the mechanical device? By the way, all those brown books you see back here,
Hmm.
those are all of Heinlein's collected works, proudly displayed above my two gun
Yeah,
safes. But
yeah,
where was I? I was talking about carriers. So I think we waste a lot of money. But I also think that the era of manned surface naval combat is over, and the United States doesn't realize it. If I were the Secretary of the Navy, I would stop all construction of all surface vessels. I would triple the size of the submarine force, and I would take the little crappy ship and I would retire that pig and replace it with diesel submarines, which is the true littoral combat ship. I mean, right now, speaking of carriers, we have the USS Ford, which cannot reliably launch and retrieve aircraft. It's like that funny skit where you had one job. And in
yeah.
this case, they can't do it because with steam catapults, you had a mean time between failure,
Hmm.
MTBF, and in engineering argot. And
Hmm.
you probably use that in the automotive industry.
A lot,
And,
a lot
and
of acronyms. Yes,
there
absolutely.
it is. There it is. In which 1 in 35,000 would fail. Well, for this, it was 1 in 175. I think they've gotten it to 1 in 350. That is unacceptable.
Yeah,
If you look down on modern carriers, you will notice that the uh, the flight line is canted 5 degrees to port. Now, why would that be? So you don't run over the aircraft that goes in the drink. Well, that happens to happen more often now with the Ford. I mean, because what happens is if I and I'm not a naval aviator and I haven't even portrayed one on TV, but if I'm there and I'm about to get my ass launched off the deck, I'm at full military power, throttle forward, and I've got the catapult kicking me in the ass. I need both those things. If I'm at full military throttle and I go forward after I salute my crewman down on the deck, and that fails, I'm probably going in the drink, especially with a pig that is the F-35. As far as ship construction, for every 2 ships we can build, the Chinese could build 350. When it
yeah,
comes to nuclear shipyards, we have 2 of them. Our pace of building ships is just god awful. If you if you get in the time machine and go back to World War II, by the time the end of that happened in 1945, James Horn Fisher, RIP, we lost you too soon, one of the best naval historians of this century, died of cancer, wrote a book. He was talking about that time in the war when it was the twilight for the Japanese Empire and such. He said America had erected a maritime civilization from the
hmm,
west coast of America to Japan. If I recall, 7,600 ships. That's a
yeah,
lot of ships. Today, we're struggling to maintain 260 plus. I think it is.
yeah.
So
And we're probably
I've rambled on.
spending orders of magnitude more money because of
Oh my
inflation
gosh.
and inflationary spending than
Well, and also
we
because of
ever did back then.
the corruption, the fraud,
Yes.
the imbecility, the
Yeah.
malpractice. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty bad. And honestly, like I said, it's why I want to have somebody that is very well versed in all of these items and things to talk about on the podcast.
I'm well
Um,
versed, but not popular in the military community.
which is fine. I mean, honestly,
Yeah.
you were in the military for quite some
I
time,
was. Yeah. A quarter
around a quarter
century.
century. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think if you've been there and you've done the things that were necessary for you to go do for the country and you're a patriot, I think you really have the God given right at that point. You've put skin in the game for a long time. I think you have the ability and really the duty to point out the things that you see that are wrong.
Yeah.
And
It's why
those
I'm the
types of
Smedley D.
people,
Butler Fellow for Military Affairs at the Libertarian Institute. So,
exactly.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
people, people see this every day in their own jobs. I mean, they see little things that are wrong, but they won't speak up and say anything.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
everyone is in a very tight area now of political correctness, and you're not allowed to say this and can't say that. So,
It's better now, though. I
um,
can say retard and smile, and people,
right,
won't get fired.
that is
And
true.
I use
That is
that word a
true.
lot.
Right. Well, I get two because, talking about ignition timing, so I can
Yeah,
actually use it that way. So, and I can say ignition timing a whole bunch. It's not a
that's
problem.
funny. Yeah,
Yeah. So the money side of it, I don't mean to keep getting there, but like
that's fine.
we're I think the Pentagon just passed 9. I know it's at least 7 or 8 audits that they could not
They can't
account.
pass. Only the Marine
Yeah,
Corps passed one. They
yeah,
can't do it. And what you would usually do in that case, Robert, is you would say, "Well, you're not getting any more money until you
yes,
account for what you've spent." It sort of riffs on what I was saying about if you're going to increase my taxes, justify your spending first. If I'm going to give you more money, prove to me that you're using it correctly. Not only the waste, but the fact that, and I have a 9-hour course at the Scott
hmm,
Horton Academy that he contracted me to do called Trail of Tears, American Stalemate and Defeat since 1945, where I
yeah,
talk about the fact that American arms have not prevailed since 1945. That's quite the sterling track record of consistency. So,
yeah. We're into the going on the 100 Years Wars, the Civil Wars in England, the Peloponnesian War. I mean, we're way off the rails and that war category. To be honest, I'm 50, and you look back. I mean, we've as a nation we've been at war since I've been alive.
yes,
And NATO and these things that were put together, the UN, none of them have done what they've claimed to do
no, none of them.
from their outset.
Yeah.
It's very
But
strange to
fraud's a
watch.
feature, not a bug.
That's 100% accurate. Looking back at the things that we know now and see the things that are in the media all the time with the Epstein files and how everyone ran on, hey, we're releasing this information. We're going to let everybody see it. And really, it's just the same old shove this under this rug, move this around. It's a shell game. They try to hide everything
But
because
you
they
know,
understand that
we
the
don't need
jig's
the
kind of up.
we don't need the proof. Robert, you and I
No.
both know that authoritarian psychopathy and sociopaths, those are the ones who become politicians. You know, they flirt with the truth, but they certainly don't need it because it's all about power. But I want to
Yes.
offer two thoughts that cross my mind. I don't want to lose them because I am getting at them in my old age. Number one, when it comes to war, wars are won by the least incompetent forces. I want everybody to burn that into your minds. And the other thing, burn this one into your mind too. Politicians are always in charge, but they're never in control.
Yeah.
Think
It
about that.
does seem that way.
Always in charge, but
Never in
they
control.
don't control
I
anything.
like that. That's
Of
good.
course, and quote me, I don't need any, accolades or recognition, just use the starch out of it.
Yeah. So they definitely get away with quite a bit. And that's one of the things that I posted earlier today on X on the Dynamis podcast page was what is a way forward politically? Because there's a lot of people that look at this now and say, the meme is you can't vote your way out of this. And it's to the point where I was pretty optimistic for a long time. Hey, there's a fight going on, and we're trying to win the cultural battle side of it, and we're using politics to do this. And politics is supposed to take the place of war. So I'm looking at it like that, and then it just seems like we've swung at the ball and it's a whiff and it's a miss all over again. Like, what's a way forward as a nation?
You know, I can't be here to give you the panacea that if you put the right reprobate in DC, that things will be righted. You can't right this ship. The only way to right the ship is nullification, secession, balkanization, and the breakup of what is now these United States. As a matter of fact, that term, these United States are, was used prior to 1860. It was
Hmm.
Lincoln that pressed the pedal to the metal and characterized it as the United States is, reversing the commonplace of the federal government working for the states. And all of a sudden, the federal government is on top of the states. And we've seen everything that's occurred since then. You know, you can't eradicate cannibals by eating other people. And that's the way I view politics, because politics is a game of violence brokerage. It's a game of who's going to be the stringless or stringed puppet up there to force resources, time, and services from people at the point of a gun. I mean, there's no government that's not like that. You and I were talking before the show started where you said that you were an ANCAP, an anarcho-capitalist, and I appreciate that because I consider myself to be one. Uh, I do have aspirational anarchist philosophical tendencies. The reason I say
Yes.
aspirational is because I know that anarchy doesn't scale, but it's still the right thing to do. And
Yes.
that if I aspire to that, it's better than aspiring to be a small government or low size government person because maybe I'll stop there. Why not, as fantastical as it may seem to people, not to have a government whip hand? I always tell them to take a look at what happened in England at the
Hmm.
beginning of the 19th century. William Wilberforce, and you will see Wilberforce's name on the banner at my stalled and dormant ZeroGov website. He was the one who stood up and he said, the ownership of other human beings is wrong.
Morally
And he
wrong.
morally wrong. He did this
Yeah.
in the very early 1800s, and he was laughed at by people. His Christian sensibilities drove him to that. And it turns out he was right. 2 generations later, it is British schooners and sail that are going after the Atlantic slave trade and stopping it in its tracks. It was England and America that stopped the slavers.
Hmm.
But there's this common misconception that right now, don't get me started on reparations and that kind of foolishness, but if you look at the Atlantic slave trade between 1510 and 1875,
Hmm.
of 13 million black folks, for the most part, who were taken from Africa, sold by other black folks on the
Hmm.
coast, who were taken from there and went across the Atlantic, what percentage of them landed on the eastern seaboard of what we now know as America? Let's take a guess, unless you already know.
I would say 1.5 million.
330,000.
I was over on that one. Under on the
The
last one, over on this one.
the majority. I don't mean to put you on the spot when I say
No,
that.
that's fine.
The
I enjoy
majority.
it, to be quite
Okay,
honest. I mean, it's
good,
like a trivia
good,
game for me, so I'm
good.
good.
So the majority went to Brazil and the Caribbean, and they did not live good lives. No slave lives a good life. But here's what we know: when we stop clicking our red ruby slippers, stop considering reparations, and stop having this kind of navel gazing where you say, "Oh, my ancestors were slaves and things were awful." Newsflash: before 1800, the planet was slavery happened all around the globe and had
Yeah.
been happening since men first stepped out of the cave. It was in the 19th century that America and England and France said no more. I don't know how we got on that topic, but there we
That's
are.
100% accurate. I mean, doulos
Yeah.
doulos is the Greek word for slave in the Bible,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
I
the
think
Roman Empire
Philemon
was built on
completely.
a slave
Yeah,
engine. So,
100%. I've been to, Wilberforce University in Ohio.
amazing.
When I read the story about William Wilberforce, I'm like, "Hey, that's a very amazing story about him kind of tricking them into going out and, hey, come out, check this, I think he set up dining tables even on top of the slave ship decks. Hey, come over here. We're going to have a really nice lunch." And everybody comes over and like, why does it smell so bad? And it's like, well, this is what it's almost like what's it called? The Ones Who Walked Away from Omelas, by, Ursula Le Guin. It's literally that story. I mean, she tells the story, very short, very quick essay that
Yeah.
it's got
Yeah.
a punch to it that kind of hits you.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
yeah, no, not very many people will know that story. So it's amazing that you bring it up, that you go into it, because it's valuable to people
Well,
that are listening to understand.
Robert, you were bringing this up earlier. Everything that you've learned in school, for the most part, is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's just when you look at a formal university, but there's a fellow by the name of Mortimer Adler who, along with Clifton Fadiman at the University
Mhm.
of Chicago, created the Encyclopedia Britannica and the Great Books of the Western World. Comes in
Okay.
two characterizations, 54 volumes and 60. I recommend the 54 because there's some proto woke bullshit in the 60 volume
Yeah.
ones. But he wrote a
So
book
did
called How to Read a Book, and I just
Okay.
said, burn these two things into your head earlier. Burn this into
Hmm.
your head as far as a book recommendation. It's How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler. He goes through the 4 stages of reading, and I'm not going to bore the audience with every stage. I'm going to make them look it up themselves. But the first one is you read a book cover to cover and you're not paying too much attention. That's the first stage. The
Hmm.
final stage, the largest stage, the historiographical as a military historian, the most valuable stage for me is syntopical reading and comprehensivism, which means that, and I'll bet in your world of what you do with cars and being a mechanic, you read 3 to 5 books or more on the same subject. And if you're an active interrogative reader, what you come to the conclusion of is, well, wait, that doesn't square up. Then you can use Ono's 5 Whys, which you guys use as a diagnostician. I use it as an engineer. I can look
Hmm.
at fishbone diagrams and I can start to examine. And for the previous knowledge I have, I ask myself when I put it in my logic machine, does that bear witness? Does that work?
Yes.
Is that correct? And I can correct some of the things. I mean, I find that on a weekly, if not monthly basis, not only
Hmm.
did I discover through my reading knowledge I had no notion of, but sometimes I'll have to correct myself.
Yes.
So, yeah.
It's so funny that you say that because I literally was looking up notes to come and have this conversation with you. And I was looking up Bayes' theorem again. And I was like, this is somewhere in this podcast, this is going to come up that we have to have this Bayesian type of mentality where we have to be able to update ourselves and move ourselves into the future psychologically, physically, all of those things, spiritually, it all has to happen. And it's so funny. I literally, like I said, I'm looking off as I have my iPad over here with all my notes that I put in there, and Bayes' theorem is in there because somewhere in this conversation, I knew that it would be you have to be able to read to a depth where you understand that comprehension, like you said in the syntax part of it. You have to be able to know that hey, this thing that I thought and had a hypothesis of is not correct, and now I
You
need to
know,
move into a
it's
different direction and be updated.
I agree. It's the long form reading that has built civilization. I have
Yes.
a pet theory that when it comes to the Enlightenment and the Renaissance,
Hmm.
there are 3 primary reasons why it was what it was, this wild burst of
Yes.
scientific engineering and mathematical advancement. It's because silent reading had come into play because the Gutenberg
Yeah.
press, because prior
Yes.
to that, people were read to, books are very expensive, and there wasn't
Yes.
much of a democratization of the utility and availability and ubiquity of books. But there's 2 other items. The introduction of coffee and tobacco into Europe.
Interesting.
So I think those 3 things, silent reading, coffee, and tobacco, is what gave us those two events.
I would say there's something to that. That I mean, that definitely seems to make sense. Um, Galileo up through science and a lot of people now, of course, science and religion, hot button topic, real quick here. You can't talk about those two things together. And many great scientists were agnostic. They were seekers. They were Christian in many cases. And honestly, like up through Maxwell, up through Humphrey Davies, all of these people that we, especially in my industry, you look back on now, like they were seeking, they were looking for God and all of these things, and then God in nature, and looking, trying to figure out what this place was that we lived in. And I think we've lost all of that, and it makes you mourn to feel that way. That you look back on it and go, "Where did it all go wrong? At how did I think the founders, and that brings up this quote I think with John Adams. I think founders had an understanding in that Enlightenment period, like you're talking about. Adam Smith on the Wealth of Nations, the short version title. Um, Literally built our economy is built, or it used to be a built, let's put it that way, on that book and those generosity style characteristics of capitalism where we could help our fellow neighbors out while we also gained from the same transaction and was able to build things that the West has never seen before. And it
Because
does, like I
only
said, it makes you
governments
feel.
create yeah, governments create the zero sum game
Yes.
by default. And what capitalism does, small c capitalism, is that you build something I can't or service it, and
Yes.
I build something that you can't. We exchange. With that peaceful exchange, maybe we can aggregate capital, whatever the case may be, and we advance from that. And then through iterative, your audience probably knows what that word means. It means that with iterative processing, what you're doing is what you've learned now, you remember that, you use it as a discovery process to move on to the next degree of sophistication. I'll give you the greatest example of I'm a Musk fanboy of
Hmm.
iterative processing. If you look at the
Sure.
3 Falcon engines, just look at the
Yeah.
pictures.
Yep.
Astonishing. Just
Yeah.
astonishing.
The Methalox Raptors. I know exactly what
Yes.
you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah, I have
And when you think
3D
about it,
printed model of one around here somewhere.
a
It's
rocket
amazing.
engine is the
Yeah.
most sophisticated, one of the most, I'm not going to say the most, one of the most sophisticated endeavors that mankind can take part in. And what's interesting about Musk is that he does something that government science refuses to do, and he opens the kimono to examine mistakes and find the first principles of his failure tree that has occurred. So there he is near Kwajalein, I think it was. He fires one of his first rockets. The rocket doesn't fare well and it comes back down. Well, what happened? So they take it, all the parts and pieces, and put it in a warehouse, put it on the
Seen
floor.
this photograph.
Okay, and
Yeah.
you've seen that. But here's
Yeah.
what's really
Looks like
interesting.
the FAA looked at it.
Yes,
Yep.
an airline disaster or something on the ground
Yeah.
where they're
Some
gathering parts
forensic.
and pieces. Yeah.
Exactly.
What they discovered in one case was that when the second and first stage separated, 5 lines of software code did not stop the engine impulse a few microseconds before separation, which means that because of that software code, the energetics of the propellant didn't stop in time not to bump the stage that was continuing up. So when you think, by the way, for science and engineering guys, making mistakes, that's our bread and butter. That's
Yeah.
what we do for a living. That's and engineers, and you know this. Uh, if you're an engineer, unlike abstract science, all of your mistakes are there for the world to see. I would say the USS Ford is Exhibit A.
Like Enzo Ferrari, he had a whole trophy area in his office with nothing but broken Ferrari parts. Every time something failed, he put it there to remind him, okay, now we have to go back to the drawing board and figure out why this
Let's
failed,
find out
how
why it
we can
happened.
fix it. Yeah.
Exactly.
And we don't do science that way any longer at all. And we definitely, I think engineering seems to have gotten, I mean, just because of the world that we live in and maybe materials and sciences, uh, materials research, I think has helped a bunch. It seems like engineering's gotten better, but it seems like the science part of it just kind of goes
If
off
I'm
the
in the
rails a little
automotive
bit.
industry and I have to pick a car marquee where I want to be an engineer, it's going to be Toyota.
Yeah.
No one else.
Yeah.
Because
Kaizen.
I'm a cruiser head. So I love Land Cruisers. And
Yeah. They're amazing vehicles. It's no wonder you love them. They're pretty good.
by the way, in Salt Lake City, where my senior son lives, there
Hmm.
is a Land Cruiser museum there. And whenever Toyota comes out with new Land Cruiser iterations, that's where they make their debut. And they must have
No
had,
kidding.
I think, 200 vehicles there. Going back to 1956. Am I right
Yeah.
with that? 54, 56
It's
for the
probably
FJ?
really
But
close.
yeah, but amazing, amazing. And by the way, having traveled around the world and gone to
Hmm.
some unpleasant places, Hollywood would tell you it's filled with Land Rovers. It's not. It's filled with
Right.
Land Cruisers,
Yeah.
and the regime change vehicle of choice is the Hilux.
Yep. Yeah. It probably has a 22R 4-cylinder in it too, still to this day.
You're singing, you're singing the song of my people.
Yeah. When I started in the industry, that was one of the things that we fixed quite a bit. They had one engineering flaw. They like to take the timing chain to eat through the coolant passage and fill the crankcase full of coolant. Other than
Okay.
that, once you fixed it though, once it was updated, there was no more issue with it. Like
You
it
saw what
it was
happened
just,
to that Toyota pickup on Top Gear.
I didn't. No, I have not seen that
Man, if you
actually.
get the chance, and maybe you can post this in the show notes with your
I'll make the
top
chance.
Top Gear,
Uh-huh.
with the fellow who does Clarkson's Farm.
Okay.
Clarkson and his crew take a red Toyota pickup, 90s, maybe the 90s, and they try to
Uh-huh.
kill it. They put it in the ocean. At one
Okay.
point, they even put it on top of a 10-story building, and it collapsed with the destruction. And all they could do was fix it with what they had. They couldn't do any detail fixes, and it it lasted so long, they put it on a plinth in the studio. So
Wow. Yeah, I don't think I've seen that, and if I did, I've completely forgotten
you'll love
about it,
it.
which does
You'll love it.
happen quite a bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've put too much information into my head, so,
I'm in the same
um,
boat.
yeah. So to John Adams, back to
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
beginning of the country, and this is shortly after, if this is 1780, so we're looking at, 9 years before the Constitution, 1789, does that sound right?
So 1787 was when they
87.
started drafting that wretched document, and then
Yes,
it was verified in 1791.
I got you,
If you've read my
1791,
writing
yeah.
in the past, you know how I feel about the Constitution. I think
What's
that it
funny
was the
that you
tombstone for the It was the tombstone for the
right.
Declaration of Independence.
That's what I was getting ready to say. What you just said will probably shake some people, but they should go look into it because honestly, when we started, I mentioned that Michael Malice was, of all people, the person that got me into this whole realm
Oh, okay.
of people that talked about these things, this libertarianism. And he's an anarchist. Like he's literally
He's
an
amazing.
anarchist. Now he's a
He's
verbal
amazing.
bomb thrower. He's not someone who
He is.
advocates for violence or whatever. But and honestly, people have that mixed a little bit. I think that if they would go and look, anarchist is the Greek term for leaderless. Is all it means. It was grafted onto and grabbed, and it was used in different propaganda campaigns and bomb throwing, real bombs.
Because of the
But
negative linguistic baggage of the word
yes,
anarchist, that's why I started referring to myself as an abolitionist, to which people would ask, well, what does that mean? It means that I don't want to tolerate the slavery of human beings. To what degree do you?
yes,
Yeah.
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
But that's literally how I ended up at this point talking to Bill Buppert on the podcast. So John Adams wrote in a letter to his wife Abigail, and for those of you that's never read these letters, they're amazing. Around May 12th, 1780, from Paris, he writes, "I must study politics and war, that my sons may have liberty to study mathematics and philosophy. My sons ought to study mathematics and philosophy, geography, natural history, naval architecture, navigation, commerce, and agriculture, in order to give their children a right to study painting, poetry, music, architecture, statuary, tapestry, and porcelain." And you don't find any writings anymore, certainly not in modern history. I guess a couple different areas, the sovereign mind that I've been reading with E.M.
Yeah.
Burlingame, you
Yeah.
find quite a bit in there, and some of it's historical and some of it's new. Definitely what would you say, an agent provocateur, if you will, for writing and
Yeah. I highly
linguistics.
recommend the Anti Federalist Papers. I think
Yes.
because I think that Hamilton was the proto Soviet. He was the baleful influence of central government in the crafting of the Constitution. Because keep in mind that there's the Constitution that finally gets ratified in Rhode Island,
Hmm.
where in the only state that they had I think it was every voter instead of the parliamentary houses or the legislative houses in the
Hmm.
respective state. They voted against it 3-1. I think that's why they were called Rogue Island after a way after a ways. But eventually,
Very interesting.
all of a
I had
sudden,
not heard
it
that
happened.
before.
Yeah, and then go forward 3 years from 1791. Where is George Washington in Pennsylvania, your home state? He is putting
Yeah.
down the Whiskey Rebellion with an
Yep.
army that is probably at odds with the size of the army that he commanded during the first American Civil War. 4 years later, what do we have? We have the Aliens and Seditions Act, where all of a sudden, even John Adams are saying, if you say things we don't like as politicians, we'll
Yeah.
shut you down. I think that happened to Benjamin Franklin's son or grandson
It sounds
with
correct.
his newspaper. And
Yeah.
then you go to 1803, 1804, where you have Marbury versus Madison. And all of a sudden, the Supreme Court, which wasn't included in the original document, is said to be the interpreter and
Yeah.
final arbiter of
Yes.
everything that happens in it. So,
That's the word I was aiming for. I was getting ready to say it if you hadn't, the arbiter, which,
yes.
gosh, no one
Yeah.
knows what that means any longer either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, those guys, literally to read the founding documents, if it was taught in schools again, especially the words of Washington, which I have over here as well, on his regarding of foreign policy and how we're supposed to be not entangled with those things that are happening around the world. And we somehow made it back to war because I want to definitely touch on this. We
Eisenhower made the
find,
same point.
yeah, we find ourselves in an interesting place where it seems, I'm being very gentle with this, but it seems that we have some multiple very powerful politicians that have taken many millions of dollars, which is interesting. If you're going to sell your country out, I think that you would take a little bit more money than this. But the Benedict Arnold class, if you will, um,
He was
seems
a
to
great
really have,
general. He was a
yeah.
very talented general.
And it seems that modern day, the things that are happening now, I mean, Benedict Arnold's small financial problems seem to be quite nothing at this
Yeah.
point
Yeah.
for what we see now. The wars that we're getting ourselves into, how do we extract ourselves from those things in Bill Bupert's estimation?
It's
How do we
funny
get
that you
ourselves out of
it's funny
those?
you would mention this.
Hmm.
They're all wars of choice since 1945. I would also venture to say that, riffing back to what we were talking about earlier in the program, World War I was guaranteeing the appearance of World War II by Wilson's entry into the war. There's this funny thing that somebody suggested to me, which is a time cop goes back and I send Robert back to assassinate baby Hitler. And you say, man, I couldn't find him, but I did assassinate Woodrow Wilson. To which I respond, baby who? Because it was Wilson that was the guarantor of the rending of the fabric of civilized humanity for the remainder of the century. And so these have all been wars of choice. Like this war with Iran is just it's wacky in so many ways. Have you looked at a map of Iran, Robert?
I have.
Look at a topo map of Iran.
Pretty large place, and it's got a lot of mountainous areas. So
Do you
like the
suggest?
10th,
I would
10th
suggest that
division.
65% of it is mountainous.
Yeah. Is that the 10th division, I think?
Which what's
Is
that?
that the is that
10th
the
Mountain
mountain
Division
division?
is a mountain division,
Yeah.
but they're not a mountain
It's
division. They're just a dumpster diver division. So
I got you.
that's why.
All
Yeah.
right. As you can see my face, I was very surprised to hear you say that. It's like, oh, okay.
Look, 10th Mountain Soldier is great, but our entire organizational
Apparatus.
table of organization and equipment for our army is so wrongheaded.
I
It's
see.
just as bad as the Navy, just as bad as the Air Force. So what would I do? Number one, I would say let's take care of home,
Hmm.
and that being a global hegemon is very expensive. Whatever an empire does abroad, it always brings it home. And there's I know you're familiar with James Monroe, and he had the Monroe
Hmm.
Doctrine, where he wanted to keep the Europeans and, by extension, the Asians out of our
Hmm.
hemisphere, out of Latin America, out of
Yeah.
Canada and the U.S. This is our place.
Hmm.
There's something called the Monroe Doctrine now that has been articulated by Donald Trump, where he wants to update said Monroe Doctrine. So I'm all about becoming a regional hegemon because it serves several purposes.
Hmm.
Number one, you don't spend as much treasure. Number two, you don't spend as much blood. And number three, from a military perspective, and China and Russia are exhibit A and B in this, you get serious about defense. We are not serious about defense for CONUS or Alaska
Yeah.
or Hawaii.
Sure.
We are laying here in the supine position, ready to be enervated by a missile barrage fusillade or whatever may be used. I did, I think, 5 or 6 episodes where I talked about the possible Muslim threat of sleeper cells in America and what that would look like. I am happy to have been wrong. I didn't extrapolate what that time frame would be and when it would happen, because that's a fool's errand. And you look like a fool if you say, "Hey, on December 21st of this year, this is going to happen."
Sure.
I don't say those kind of things, but I did say that the possibility of Islamic sleeper cells here with collegiate woke auxiliaries is and remains a very real possibility. There's a book called 1 Second After by William Fortune, and he wrote a small novella called Deuce Irae. I hope your audience is taking notes if they're interested in the books.
I hope so as well.
Where, where he talks about an assault by a cell.
Hmm.
If I recall, it's 1,000 men, 10-man cells, and what they do is they launch on a certain day and time, coast to coast, and they go after on the first day they go after the public. On the
Hmm.
second day, they go after government buildings, shopping malls, things like that, and
Hmm.
schools. On the third day, they go after infrastructure. Why is the cycling 1, 2, and 3 days? Because every day they go after something, all local to federal police and everything in between protects what they went to the day before, leaving exposed those things they assault on the second day. It's a frightening scenario,
Yeah.
and I think one could read it in a day. William Fortune, Deuce Irae, I recommend it. Uh, if we minded our own business, for instance, I know this. I don't dip my toe in the conspiratorial fever swamp if I can't because I can't keep up with it. But 9/11 would not have occurred, I suspect. This is
Hmm.
counterfactual if we had not fucked around with the Middle East as much as we do. You know, part of the origin story of that is there's a book by David Fromkin called The Peace to End All Peace. And in 1918 through 1921, against T.E. Lawrence's advice, Churchill, Wilson, and the rest of those reprobates make right angle mapping regardless of clan, blood, affiliation, religious affiliation in the Middle East. And they have set in stone all the kind of racking wars and civil unrest we have because there's a dirty little secret about big wars. All big wars, without exception, breathe oxygen into the cold or modest embers of previous civil strife and conflict. I would give you Serbia in the 90s as Exhibit A, and I would also tell those who are interested look at what happened in Europe from 1945 to 1952. By the way, England was still rationing in 1954.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could believe that.
It would be a withdrawal from the world, not isolationist, non interventionist, which means that we export commerce abroad with everybody, but we don't export violence.
Sure. So very similar to the farewell address by George Washington, father of the nation, speaking on foreign entanglements, keep out, be
Yeah.
like the Swiss, be
Yeah.
neutral, be a friend to all, hit hard if we're hit, but not to be that person who shoves their nose into every small group of people that are bickering or fighting back and forth. And to dovetail into what you were talking about, I would highly recommend people go listen to another podcast that I listened to a long time ago. And it really changed my mind on some of this, the Israeli and the Muslim fights that have happened over the years, especially over the Levant, which is Fear and Loathing in the New Jerusalem by Bill
Yes,
Buppert of Martyr.
absolutely.
It's an unbelievable series, and I was brought into that series by another one of his podcasts, which is Jim Jones, People's Temple, a
Which was
God
fantastic.
Socialist. Unbelievable. Honestly, I've mentioned this multiple times on the internet, but the guy deserves some type of an award for that. I mean, he used to give Pulitzers for things that were like that. Very PhD level, I would say, researched. Daryl's got a very interesting, almost slightly autistic way of speaking. He uses his fingers quite a bit when you see him on video, but he brings it
Either
to
autistic
life
or
when he
Indonesian.
yeah, one of the other. I do it sometimes too, so I'm not saying anything I would never say about my own
He's
self.
a fellow artist. I'm an artist too.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
brings these things to life when he reads them on his podcast, but to your
But you should
point,
listen to the Anti-Humans episode.
I've listened to it like 4 times. I have to stop it.
I
Like
tell people it's
the
soul
foot
searing.
standing into I'll let people listen to it on their own, but it's unbelievable the things that have happened in the past that we really don't know about. And the book Ordinary Men that I was, I think actually Jordan Peterson had it on his book list that I ended up reading. Unbelievable, just atrocious and atrocities that's happened all over the world.
Everybody's subject to that. Read about what
Yes.
happened in Indonesia in the 1960s between the Sukarnos and the Suhartos. And I second your recommendation on Fear and Loathing. And if people find his podcasts too much to listen to, they must listen to the final episode of Fear and Loathing so that they can be informed about the Nakba and they can know what happened to the Palestinians. Now, when it comes to Israel and Palestine, my position is I want to support neither. I want
Yeah.
nothing to do with either one of them. And
I'm the
all I
same.
want to do is sell oil if I could, or whatever you want to buy, but and stay out of my country.
Yeah. No, I'm 100%
Yeah.
with that. And
Yep.
it's sad to see that it goes that direction. But to be quite honest, there's a lot of people that say that the Muslims are the broom of Israel, that they use them to go and do these things throughout the world by these bickering, these fighting, and I don't know if that's 100% accurate, but I can
Look,
certainly see how it would work.
Israel's an ethno state. It's an ethno
Yes.
state. Do you
They get away
know
with things there that we do not get away with here.
they
Like
do?
it
Do you
would
know
be in the
what
news
percentage of
all day long.
yeah? Do you know what percentage of land in Israel is owned by the Israeli government?
Well, I thought it was God's land first off, but but I would say probably a very high number. I'm going to go back with 94%.
Look
So
at
you
you.
used
You
you
got it.
used
No, you nailed it.
94% earlier.
You nailed
So
it.
I'm going to go
You
with that
nailed it.
one.
Okay, you
But I
nailed it.
mean, it makes sense to the way that they fight for these things. I mean, the thing that Trump had mentioned about, we're going to put Trump Tower in Gaza. Like it's almost like they're doing all of the work,
Plenty of room
the
now.
destruction work for something like that to take place. So quite interesting.
So
But
for me, I love the Swiss model. You had mentioned the cantons earlier, and the cantonment system in Switzerland was the inspiration for the Articles of Confederation prior to the
mhm,
Constitution. So
yeah, yeah,
we're all
and
over the map
it's
here, Robert.
oh, that's perfectly fine. But it's sad that people do not know these things, and hopefully this sparks curiosity and shocking the normies, like I mentioned before we went on podcast. I would like people to be able to go out and see these things and listen to them and read them and become
And come to
educated
their
about
own
them.
decision
Yes.
because
Yeah. Don't take my word for it.
yeah, intellectual
Yeah.
curiosity is it's a manifestation of a high IQ.
Yeah.
So,
It's a lost start, certainly.
for instance, Joe Rogan, biggest
Hmm.
podcast in the world. One
Yeah.
thing I appreciate about him is that he is genuinely intellectually curious.
Yeah.
So is Tucker. So is Daryl
Yeah.
Cooper. So is Scott Horton and all these guys.
Yeah. We can't end without mentioning Tom Woods' quote about every time I vote for somebody, I always end up with John McCain. Because
Tom Woods,
honestly,
he's a legend.
yeah, and honestly, I mean, other than Alex Jones being right quite a bit in the past, 25 or 30 years, there's not another person that's on the internet that's sold books and has these shows and comes out and talks that's been more right about a single quote than probably Tom Woods with that
Absolutely.
quote.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, I tell people that my wife and I don't vote on principle, and I know members of the audience will say, "Well, you don't have a say in it," and I would refer them to George Carlin's 4-minute skit on why, if you are an accessory to the crime of voting, you have no say in it. But I have a model for a voting booth. You ready?
mhm,
Okay, it has a very large phallus on it for the voting lever and you place your vote by putting your mouth on the phallus, and that way
right.
you get a preview of what you've done.
Yeah, it's almost that way. It's so funny you said that because I was thinking that on the way home today. I'm thinking, you know what? Like we're just political whores. That's all we are right now. Like we vote for people because I've done this. I'm 100% guilty of it. The last guy. Hey, you mentioned earlier. I'm withdrawing everything. I'm moving everything backwards. I'm bringing things home. We're going to focus on home. I'm like, I'd vote for you for president, Mr. Bill Bupert. And I'm thinking, I already done that. I've done that in the past. I'd done that like a year and a half ago. So to see what's happened, you're
Pat
100%
Buchanan.
accurate. Yeah.
Pat
It's
Buchanan.
it's Pat Buchanan all over.
Yeah,
So
it
yeah,
is.
it's pretty interesting to see
And
how
then,
everything has kind of cooked out.
and it's, and they made isolationist into a 4-letter word. So I
Yeah.
simply use the term, as I do with abolitionists, I use the term non-interventionist. What's wrong with minding your own business? I'm like right
Seems like
now, I
nothing.
don't have a dog in the fight in Iran. I don't,
Yeah.
how have they offered any harm to us? And Iran's troubles didn't start in 79. It started in 1953 when we installed the Shah.
The Shah. Yeah.
Yep. And it goes back. Iran, as Persia, is one of the longest running civilizations on earth. And they have a very curious thing that happens in their history in which when they're invaded, the invaders tend to take on Persian accoutrement and cultural ecology because
Yeah.
it's so
Sounds like Lawrence of Arabia.
T. Lawrence. You know, gosh, I probably did 4 episodes. He's one of my spirit animals. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'll have to definitely check those out because I've
yeah.
not gotten to check those out.
But the only thing I don't, I mean, he gargled male organs, and as a married man, that's
Oh,
not something that I do.
right.
But
It's
I really,
not something you want to do, not something you promote, all
you
those
know,
types of things.
it's not. But you know what? I always say, what a person puts in their mouth is their own business. Just keep
Right.
it
Yeah.
there. Just
Yeah. I
whatever
want
you do
nothing
in
to
your
do with
house,
it.
yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. That's probably a good spot to stop
Okay.
before both
Hey,
of us
can
are
I leave you with
canceled,
a riddle?
kicked off the. Oh, absolutely.
I'm gonna leave you with a riddle. What's the difference between a dildo and a politician?
Man, I think I've actually heard this before. I don't remember what it is.
They
I don't
both do
remember
the
the
same
answer.
thing, but only one gives you an orgasm.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. It's 100% accurate because the other one, it's nothing but pain, torture, strife, all these other things that come along with it. People on the other side of the aisle telling you, "Hey, I told you so." Okay, that's the least part of all of it. The betrayal is Dante level 9 at this point.
Yeah,
To be honest,
yeah,
it's icy
yeah.
layer of hell that
Well,
awaits.
it's the uniparty. Now, okay, I just said, let me tell you, we'll sign off. Let's sign off after I say
Right.
this.
Sure.
Between 1952 and 2008, everybody will note that the Republicans could not be in the awful office, and you can spell that OFFAL or AWFUL, pick one, could not be there unless there was a Nixon or a Bush on the ticket, because the Nixon and the Bush were the deep state apparatchiks. How could I say that about Richard Nixon? They're trying to revive his reputation now.
Hmm.
He gave us the DEA, he gave us the
Yeah.
EPA,
Yeah.
he took us off the gold
Gold
connection,
standard. Yep.
and he
Silver
wanted to
standard.
ban handguns in America.
Yeah. Can't can't do any of that.
Calvin Coolidge
So
for me every day.
hey,
That's my
cut the
president.
federal government in half. That
There it is.
is something
That's a
I would
good
vote
start.
for. That's
That's
a
a
great
good
start.
start.
We'd save trillions of dollars a year.
We would.
I would definitely love to have you back on to do something with the CIA, to do something with IC, intelligence community at
Sure.
large.
Yeah.
So at some point in the future, possibly.
That is a large intellectual cavalcade of calamities.
Yes, it is. That's a great way to put it. That's very poetic, sir.
And I want to offer, maybe this will be homework or a preamble, but there's a book by a fellow by the name of Weiner called Legacy of Ashes, and it's a terrific brief history of the CIA. I
Hmm.
recommend it.
Yeah, I have to definitely get that. I've tended to listen to more books now than I read, only because
Yeah,
I can mow the
yeah.
grass while I listen, and I can kind of be between a focus and a diffuse mode mind. And it seems like for some reason I soak them in. I stop the Audible app and I type in and make notes. I was doing it today on the way home. Don't tell Pennsylvania I was doing that in my car, but um,
I
it's
love I love
it's bad.
Audible and podcasts and stuff. One that I've
Yeah,
been hooked on for the past year is, I think I've listened to 170 hours of the unauthorized history of the Pacific War, and it's
no kidding.
absolutely amazing. So, yeah,
I'll have to check that out as well.
yeah.
All those listeners out there that are listening right now, as two fairly aged men are talking about this stuff. I recommend going and looking these things up
Yeah,
because A, it's
yeah,
part of your history. And secondly, you might find out some things that are not as savory as you might have thought about the nation that you
yep,
live in. Speaking
yep.
of that, we have to do a Operation Paperclip at some point as well. So,
Okay, we could do that.
and
Now, would Operation
the
Paperclip
fact
be
that Musk,
the repatriation of German scientists to the U.S.?
it would be absolutely. And then
Well, we'll
also
also have to do Operation Keelhaul when we talk about that.
that one I've not heard of, but
So
then I would, okay.
Churchill, what does he use as his pretext to go into World War II? Poland,
You know,
right?
it's as I say, it's funny because I've never understood like what the English's issue was because I'd seen that there was multiple treaties that were signed and Hitler went back on most of those, but
Well,
I didn't know. So it's Poland.
Hitler and Stalin in September 1939 were
Hmm.
in a non-aggression pact that lasted
Yep.
until late spring 1941, in which they cooperated as allies. The Russians met the Germans in the middle in Poland. And Churchill only declared war on the Germans and not
Interesting.
the Russians. So 1945 comes around. What does Churchill, who's the author of this infamous enterprise, what does he do with Poland? He gives it to Stalin.
Land grabs, land, back and forth.
I'm not a
It's
big fan of
amazing.
Churchill for a variety of
No,
reasons.
well,
So, yeah.
I'm not either. Now that I've educated myself a little bit on the things that happened at that point in time.
Yeah, when they were given, if you go back in my episode catalog, when they were given Daryl Cooper grief over Churchill,
Yeah,
I I did an episode where I demonstrated why Daryl Cooper was morally correct. And I
yeah,
talked about Operation Keelhaul. And what
yeah.
Operation Keelhaul was the repatriation of Russian men, women, and children back to the Soviet Union and what happened during that time. I'm
I
going to
see.
leave it to your audience and yourself to listen to the last 15 minutes to know just who Churchill was, not to mention what he did to the Bengalis in India during World War II with the mass famine campaign.
Yeah, that's another thing that I have
Yeah,
heard in the past.
yeah.
Someone said that if you think that some of these terrorist organizations torture people, like you have no idea what the Brits were capable of. I think I heard that in
Oh, well,
one of
the
his
Brits gave us
podcast backstory.
concentration camps. They gave
Yeah.
us concentration camps during the first two Boer Wars. And by the way, the Germans in 1905 and 1906 were
Hmm.
paying attention and copied them because they were down in Namibia and German East Africa. So
Hmm.
they were taking notes. But then again, the Germans and the British have been intermarrying as aristocrats for centuries.
Sure.
So
Yes, they
yeah,
have blue bloods.
yeah.
Now, a piece of homework for you. There's a conspiracy theory. That's where it comes back to. There's a conspiracy theory out there that says that some of the world seen the engineering prowess of the First World War Germans, that they had this engineering acumen that you mentioned earlier in the program. Um, Look into that and find out if there's any type of real validity in that, because apparently they were like, hey, we have to stop the Germans. First off, they're barbarians because that's what back for centuries and millennia with the Romans.
Millennia.
Yeah, millennia with
They
the
call them
Romans. But
barbarians. Look, the Romans called them barbarians because they kicked their ass and stopped them at the Rhine.
yeah, that's exactly it. So
They
maybe,
lost 3 legions doing that.
yes, they did. And if I remember correctly in the movie Gladiator, that's how it opens.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
Romans are
Well,
fighting
in that
against.
but it is. They're fighting them, but in that case Aurelius did manage
Yeah.
historically to defeat them, but stopped there. It's just like north of the barrier line, Hadrian's Wall in
Yes.
England. That was not a good place to be a Roman.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look,
We'll
we're all
definitely
over
have
the
to
map.
we'll have to do one of those too, because I love that type of history all the way back in with the blue faces, the Celts, the people, the Saxons that they walked in on and were like, goodbye. We're not dealing with any of these people. We're out of here. They left
Read,
Britannia.
read, read Caesar's commentary in his war with the Gauls, and then later in Britain. It's
As I
very
say,
interesting.
that I've not, but I've listened to quite a bit of Cicero. I love Cicero.
I
It's,
love
I mean,
Stoics.
parts of our, I was getting ready to ask you about that too, because are you familiar with Donald J. Robertson on Substack?
I am not, but I'm a capitalist Stoic, and I'm always interested
So he's written
in checking that out.
multiple books, How to Think Like Marcus Aurelius. It sounds like they're pop psychology, pop Stoicism. However, I went and seen him speak at the University of Wyoming when I was living out there in Laramie, and a very interesting, very eccentric guy. He was a clinician for 20 plus years in London, and then he wrote multiple different books. Like I said, How to Think Like Marcus Aurelius. He wrote one about Marcus Aurelius being a child called Verissimus. So the one
I
who
have it.
is always truthful. So
I have it.
that's him. So um, interesting guy, but he just come out with he's doing a whole series on Stoicism again. I just reshared it. I restacked it to my Substack, but that's something that we could possibly talk about in the future as well. I love
Well, as a matter of fact,
Stoicism as well.
way back when I did a multiple part series with the School Sucks podcast on Stoicism,
Oh, okay.
and I did have a companion podcast on Stoicism called The Dash, but I
Okay.
found that it's easy to exhaust Stoic knowledge over time because not only is it the university of the intuitively obvious, but it's also something where once you get the rhythm of it, you think
Yeah.
it all makes sense and locks in. So
Yeah. They were
it's
like the
why I
first.
insisted that my boys would I said, look, when you wake up in the morning, you have one question to ask yourself. How
Yeah.
do I suck less?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I think I end up following your other Substack that you had started um,
okay.
to write about teaching your sons Stoicism and
Yeah.
Stoic thought.
Yeah.
So I seen
Yeah.
that as well. But
And they're all Stoics now as adults. My
yeah.
youngest son is 29. So
Yeah. And they were
I'm
really
ancient.
the first psychotherapists in a way, all the way back to Zeno of Citium.
I don't know if they would appreciate that appellation. I don't
Well,
know.
it's, I say that loosely, of course, but when it comes to being able to, what did Socrates say? He said that an unexamined life is not one that's worth living.
That's correct.
Um,
Yeah.
a lot of people don't want to look at themselves. They don't want to see those
You
things that
know,
are
I'm in the
ugly about
winter of my
themselves.
years. And if I lose my
Sure.
ability to examine my life, I just want to assume room temperature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the only way that you get better. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
I,
It was a
yeah,
pleasure to be here and an honor to
yeah,
be here. And the Chasing Ghost podcast and the War Notes podcast. And
yeah,
I'm on Substack. And
yeah.
Robert,
And
man, what a great conversation.
I appreciate it. I really do. And I'll be sure to make sure that I spread this thing as far and wide as I possibly can. So
Okay.
I appreciate having
This
you
is
on,
great.
sir. Yeah, I'm very happy to have met you, to be quite
Me
honest.
too.
So
I feel the same.
many more.